Okay, call the meeting to order here at 6 o'clock. I'll ask the administration, I guess no adopts a special meeting, right? Okay, I'll take a motion for the agenda. Councilor Burrows.
I'll move the agenda if we adopted as presented.
Motion on the floor, ask a question, all in favor? That one's carried. 3.1, 2024 operating and capital budget. Mr. Frank?
Yeah, your worship, members of council, you attached to your agenda is the presentation in regards to the 2024 capital and operating budget. Mr. World will take you through the highlights of the operations section of that, and the department staff members are here to answer any questions in regards to their specific areas of responsibility. And the other thing that we would like to see, or I shouldn't say see, would like to review is the capital budget that you had preliminary went through at your last budget meeting.
Okay. Starting on the capital side.
Your worship, members of council, as previously indicated, council met, now I gotta remember, when did we meet? We met to discuss the capital budget, and council asked that administration do some revisions. So we have moved cold mix into the number one priority. And again, when I say priority, it's simply a listing of that. And we also moved the speed indication sign for Fort Assiniboine, totaling for $2.992,500 to meet our $3 million financial reserve. And then previously council had considered some $875,000 additions in the 2023 budget, and that's the second column there. And we moved the tandem plow trucks and the mini excavators over to that column. So those were the changes.
Question I have, I guess, in regards to the debentures on the roads, when we get to that, what type of projected term are we looking at on those? Maybe like a 20-year out, 10-year out?
Your worship, council, I used 20 years for the roads on the budget portion.
Okay.
And the interest rate was, when I did the interest rate, it was about 5.85. I checked it yesterday and it's down to 5.35 for a 20-year debenture.
On the capital side, any other questions from administrator or from council? We kind of talked about this last time. So Councilor Burrows and Councilor Prestige.
Just the big picture on when I see the 2.4 and 1.85 debentures coming up for the roads. We talked about the asset management plan for roads is done, and council's supposed to be looking at more of a big picture idea, and I don't know what other projects are coming up next year, or the year after that, or the year after that. We can start bumping up against borrowing limits very, very quickly when we don't know what projects are in the hopper for the next 5-10 years. And I'm wondering when we're going to see that program.
Yeah, your worship, members of council, the asset management, we're still gathering data, and we're not doing any evaluation at this point in time, unfortunately. However, we are using the knowledge of the staff that exists here over the years to identify areas of priority, as well as a combination of our bridge files, because they have an ongoing history of almost 25 years in regards to making sure that those files have existed, or what's the word I'm thinking, and being evaluated. And in regards to the specific question in regards to a 20-year capital plan, I know that that's being worked on, and unfortunately, Mr. Bashan fell ill today and probably could answer that. So probably on Monday, I can get you a firm answer.
Just a quick one, I thought just for our previous discussions that we already had in the asset management, the roads categorized and stuff in there, so.
Your worship, members of council, yes, but again, the one of the part of the asset management, once the information is in there, you have to start to begin to evaluate the information, and then come up with a plan to implement that asset management. So,
Councillor Prestige, then Councillor Wilhelm.
Through the chair, I still have a problem with the cold mix. Just redoing the cold mix on our roads, you might as well just take the money and throw it away. It's not gonna last. That money should be put into stabilizing the road bed first before we do cold mix.
I think the intent is to put $658,000 into the cold mix roads, whether it's fixing the base or doing something, it's just money allocated for those roads. But before we obviously start recapping and doing that, I know this council definitely wants to see what we have for options, or evaluating on some of those roads that continuously have the shortfalls, so we can try to like you said, stabilize it or do something to the base so that their longevity of those roads are there. Because a lot of them just, it isn't, and we don't want to just keep putting a Band-Aid on it, so.
Yeah, because you might as well just burn the money, because that's all it's doing.
Councillor Wilhelm?
Okay, kind of two questions. Through the chair to administration, can you remind me, what's our, we have a limitation of how much money we can debenture. What is that total?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilhelm, I think we're at about, we have 31 million of allowed debt, and we're at about 6.2. That's rough numbers. I went and looked the other day. So we're at just over 6 million, and I think we're allowed 30 million.
Okay, and then the second thing would be, we've got 2 or 3 items here to fund by debenture. And as Councillor Burrow says, we don't know what's we currently don't know what's coming up next year or the year after that. It would be a good idea to know what that is before we make a decision on like the taxiway east PLR upgrade. Like, that's a significant dollar figure, 3.575 million, which looks like pretty low on the priority list. And when I read through it previously, this was kind of just an optional thing if we wanted to do it this year. So making a decision on something like that would be good to know. We know we're at 6 million. We can go to 31 million. I don't know if we want to quite get there, but what's going to come in for a major project in 2024 or 2025 that we need to know about. So
That's a need.
it's a need, yeah, not just a want.
Councillor Prestige?
Through the chair, on the debentures, it'd be nice to know what we have outstanding and when they're gonna be getting cleared.
Through the chair to Councillor Prestige, we have a schedule, so we could provide that to council. It's obviously the interest rates on most of our debentures are quite low compared to what we're borrowing at now, in the 2 to 2.5 range. But I do have a schedule. It's just not included in our presentation.
you can look on the financial statement. There,
It's also
Yeah.
in the financial statements.
so it's 7.886 million total debt. And the debt limit is 37,204,853.
Yeah, the number is a little bit inflated because we have a debenture for another party that's not the counties. So that's why I had the $6 million number for the county.
The, how many more years out before we start having some of those other debentures start dropping off, do we know?
I'm just reading that. Somewhere it tells me that.
There's a schedule.
30, so, 31 is where the majority of them, I would say, right? And 32 is, I'm just adding them up, 1.7, 2.4, 3, 6, 4, 5 and 2, 7 million. So the majority of them will fall off in
Probably 80%.
31 and 32.
Councillor Wilhelm?
Through the chair to council then. So with that information, what are your guys' mindsets on the proposed debentures? I mean, East and West Mountain Road are main thoroughfares for a lot of our residents, but these seem like a need, but the taxiway is more of a want, and are we comfortable with all three of those?
Councillor Burrows first.
Yeah, through the chair, to council, I don't want to approve another debenture at all in a budget until I get an idea of what we're doing 10 years out, at least 10 years out. The familiarity that infrastructure has with the roads, they should be able to create a quick list for us. Like, we don't need the entire, fully colored, painted picture kind of deal. We just need a sketch, at least, something. And just at the rate that we're going. And there's some granting and things available at the airport that wouldn't necessarily be available on the roads. So there might be opportunities there to keep it in, not necessarily spend it, but if you can get the grants, then great. But that, I wouldn't want debenture. I just don't want to get further in debt. Like, we just dug out of this.
Councillor Wilhelm?
So I guess to respond to Councilor Burrows, so then we do have another meeting on Monday. Would they request then to administration to at least give us something in the next 5 years of potential debentures that might be required? What would make you somewhat comfortable in it?
I would say 10 at least.
As to administration, is that a list that we would have time to compile for our Monday meeting on?
Yep. Again, barring Mr. Bashan being available Monday. Like, I mean, that list is in one form or another, right? So,
I think it's a fair request.
Yeah.
All right, so while we're here, is there any other discussions on what we have here in capital? Then we'll bump this till Monday, I guess, on the capital discussion and go on to operating. Councillor Prestige?
One more thing through the chair. It's fine to do these debentures, but we have to service that debt. So we spend money servicing the debt. That's money that we don't have to spend on capital or operations. So we have to be careful.
So,
Right.
just to put it in perspective, Mr. Rowe, you probably have a quick calculator, amortization calculator in front of you. What would, you said we're borrowing at what, right, about 5% right now?
5.75 it was, I think, or 5.35.
So just using round numbers, $10 million if we were to venture that at 5% over 20 years is what? What's the actual cost of borrowing?
I could run it for you.
If you can run it for us, it'd be awesome. And we don't have to wait. I'd just like to know.
Okay, any other questions on the capital side?
50,000.
Not saying Mr. Frank, if you want, we'll move down to the operating side then. Or you did these.
20 years.
Your worship, if we could maybe start with start with the presentation first, to just go over a few things. Nikita, can you put the presentation on? Just to preface what we're going to go through on the initiative page. So I think Mr. Frank already mentioned in his RFD how we seeded the budget. We followed the recovery plan. We did add 2024 initiatives, but they've not, of course, been reviewed with you yet. And they are in extra beyond the 1% recovery plan. So you can see in the budget, we have a 6.89% increase on costs. I shouldn't say net costs, I should say costs. And if you remove the initiatives, we're at 0.99%, which is basically the 1% in the recovery plan. So we felt like when we started the budget process, that was kind of our end goal, was to have the budget start at 1%, and then if we wanted to add more, we did that separately. The transfer to reserves, which was the funds left over, I have it noted here as $778,000, but I did discover an error in the budget today. I included the carry forwards in the operating budget, so we'll have a surplus closer to $2 million. And then on page 6, I just wanted to talk a little bit about inflation and some of the things.
Go ahead, Councilor
sorry.
Rustage.
Through the chair, we have 2 lease graders on that. What is that? Because I thought we were buying the graders.
Through the chair to Councillor Prestige, those are 2 different graders that are been put into roads and sidewalks budget for discussion with council. Those are different graders.
Sorry, I don't follow you.
Oh,
They're not the 2 graders that were being purchased. They are 2 different graders, new graders that they want to lease.
right, okay, so we'll continue where you're at right now. We'll see when we start getting these line by line, if there's more information on those.
So in terms of inflation, we did see some increases, especially in the utility side. Natural gas, the carbon tax is going up 23% next year, so that's the majority of that increase. Power, we had a new contract for 2022 that was not put in the 2023 budget properly, so that's why we're seeing an increase in 2024 power, but that will be locked in now for the next 3 years after that. So we shouldn't see any more further power increase. And then we have some revenue offsets, or one cost, the Fort celebration. This is obviously not required, so it's not in council's budget this year. We had a fairly strong increase in interest income because of our cash balances and just better interest rates. And overall in the budget, we did decrease legal services quite substantially. If you add up those net numbers, it's actually a credit. So we've gone through the capital budget, so now we'll move to the initiative page, or page 12 of the presentation, if you could. So I wanted to just talk about revenue compared to the 2023 budget. You can see that we put in a 3% tax increase based on 2023 actuals. So that came in at 2.94%. Interest revenue was higher by $492,000. And if you'll notice, there's some vehicle disposal for $412,000. That's actually the sale of the graders. Currently, those are in revenue. We did not change the budget based on your conversation you had yesterday. Grants are kind of unknown in terms of the LGFF, but based on the fact that the pool is bigger than what MSI was, we're using the MSI number as the budget for the year right now. But if you look at the pools of funds that are committed to the program, it's actually bigger than last year's pool of funds. So we think we're being conservative there. And general operating revenue, you can see is down by 100 or 93%. That's due to tax funds we got back from PERC. Last year, we weren't budgeting any for 2024.
I got a question here for you, Mr. King.
Yeah, through the chair too, Andrew. With respect to the pool of funds that LGFF is going to draw from, the pool may be bigger, but it's my understanding that the percentages that of that pool that the municipalities would be attributed to each municipality, ours may actually go down. There's different factors being weighed, and we actually may get less.
Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Dean. So my understanding is it's still up for discussion. I know the RMA have asked for them to add $2 billion more into that program. So I haven't seen anything to give me any comfort that I know the number, but I think that my view is that I would have a feeling that it would be at least close to what we got under the old program.
Okay, all right. So it's still a moving target, obviously, then.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, you will revisit it, of course, in March when we know what the number is, and we'll make budget changes as we need to make. So at this point in time, we're making a lot of assumptions and estimates because we just don't know. And I haven't seen any firm timeline for when they're going to announce how they're going to do that calculation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on the next page, expenses. So this is kind of the following the recovery plan. We remove amortization from the calculation because it's non-cash. And then we make a few adjustments for the carry forward capital, transfer to reserves, and we come up with what our adjusted expenditures are. And then when I remove the initiatives, you'll see that our actual increase is about 0.99%, which is about $312,000 for excluding the initiatives. And then we'll go through the initiative page, if the larger page you have in front of you, and we'll let each manager, I guess, will speak to their initiatives that they have in the operating budget. Maybe we'll start with Mr. Franks and under the administration.
Your worship, members of council, you're gonna handle the financial system, or you want me?
Well, you can do it, yeah, I can do it.
Huh?
I can do it, yeah.
The items that anticipating to begin to restore the level of service for with the organization. There are two new positions that are being considered, an assistant CIO in anticipating of my retirement, as well as the director of community services. And there are two other positions of half-time and economic development assistant and patrol services, and we can, when we go through those departments, we can speak to those in regards to that. We've also done a carrying forward or over in regards to the census, and that can either be taken or removed, and then we can put it as a carry forward, or we can leave it in the budget and have a surplus at the end of the year, or add it to the surplus at the end of the year that we have. And those are the ones that I have. Oh, there is you're gonna speak to the,
Councillor Dean, the question there.
Through the chair to the CEO, can you explain the Director of Community Services position? Is this a new position? Is this requiring hiring of staff?
yeah, your worship, members of council, if I can direct you to the 2 pages down on the presentation. In 2019, there was a Director of Community Services, and we're asking council the consideration of reinstating that for consideration. And that individual would look after fire, protective services, eventually recreation, community planning, FCSS, economic development. I think I'm missing one.
Councillor Wilhelm, see your hand up there.
He answered my question. I was gonna ask what they're responsible for.
Councillor Dean.
And one other question, with respect to the Assistant CEO, would the prospective grant for interns, would that offset any of that cost?
You'd have to appoint that individual as the assistant CEO then. So, yes, if you did that.
Okay, so if that Assistant CEO was hired, then a grant could be applied for and funds could be applied to the salary of that person?
No, the individual that is a municipal intern would have to have that title to be able to
Gotcha.
apply for that.
Okay, so as it states, as Assistant CEO, that would not be applicable for the funding?
Your worship, members of council, and because it's a personnel matter, I can go into further detail, but I would ask that the staff be removed and we go into closed session to have that discussion, and I can explain in more detail of my thought process into that, and I would prefer it to be at the end of the meeting so that staff don't have to come back.
Okay, we'll put that at the end of the meeting. Councillor Wilhelm.
Through the chair to CAO, this summary page that you have here, there's no titles on the top of the column, so I'm just wondering, like, we've got 1 through.
Oh, I must have
can
got
you-
cut off.
Yeah, can you just,
Yeah.
I can kind of
so-
guess what they are, but
Yeah.
I'd like to know what they are.
Your worship, members of council, the left side column is the 2019 organization. The next column to the right is the proposed 2004, with the understanding of how, at the bottom of that column, how people were added to the organization since 2019. We also propose some positions in 2025, so as well. And then those, the names, the column to the right are the names associated with the positions as they exist. And obviously, we eliminated those positions, the 13 positions that were in the organization. And then the column to the far right indicates whether they had a title change or there was no change in the position. And then the costs associated with the estimate of the positions, including the benefits.
Councillor Wilhelm.
Line item 57, economic development assistant as a halftime. There's no wage value inside that one?
It's combined with that other halftime of
Oh, okay.
64,000.
Oh, I see.
Councillor Gross.
Is there a new org chart that goes along with this that we could figure out? 'Cause
Your worship, and through the council boroughs, the answer is no, because at this time, they're just proposals, so however, we could put something together if you wanted to.
Okay. Guess we want to keep going here through the departments. We'll see where the.
Okay, well, Your Worship, I can speak to the information technology section,
Okay.
where we're asking for 300,000 for integrated financial system. Currently, there's already 300,000 in reserves that was put away in 2019, with the anticipation that we would have to replace our financial system at some point in time. We've been told now by our software provider that its end of life is January 1st, 2026. So they will not service it any longer. So after 28 years of service from our software system, we have to make a change. So my understanding by looking at other RFPs and other municipalities is it's a very expensive proposition. We're hoping that 600,000 would be enough to get a fairly good financial system and hopefully integrated with our asset management system. So our plan is this has to be a fully integrated system with asset management. We are not there right now, and that's one of the reasons why we're struggling to get you information, because our finance system does not talk to asset management, not on a cost basis. So when we go to RFP, that'll be one of the requirements, is that we get a fully integrated system. Another municipality went to RFP recently, a little bit larger municipality than us, but they spent about close to 600,000. I think it was 300 for their financials, 200 for their asset management, and then they added some other modules they wanted. So it's not an inexpensive product, and it's it's a challenging process. And you need somebody to run the ship on in terms of managing the project. And that'll be something that we'll probably have to look at consulting out, because it's just internally, we just don't have the resources.
A question for you in that, how long is it, from start to finish on that process, if we were to start changing over the software, how long does that take?
So we would want to match the two systems till the end of the year. Like, we want to go dual, we run them both at the same time to make sure that everything's balancing. So you would try to have it done by the end of 26 would be your goal, or end of 25. So kind of go out to RFP or RFQ this year, have an implementation plan in place, roll out the software with our current software, running them dual while at the same time. And then once you're comfortable that that system works, you can move over to the new system.
Anything else from council? Right. Mr. Frank, you want us to, I guess, keep moving on the list here, so our protective services?
We can, just the other thing that we will mention, we are proposing a 3% wage increase, which includes council as well in their budget as well, because that's the, but yet to be determined.
That's part of the COLA increase for
Yeah.
employees.
Yeah.
All right, Sheldon, whenever you're ready.
All right, through the chair to the council. On your screens in front of you, I don't know what you see because I don't see it on the. You're seeing that there.
Yeah, that big page there.
All that. We'll go like this.
You just have the one initiative, Sheldon.
So on the operating budget for 2024 for protective services, it has always been mentioned that there would be a protective services assistant brought on. And that's all I'm seeing in front of me here.
That's all we're speaking to now is just the initiatives.
The initiative?
Just your new initiative for staff. Just more around the reasoning for it.
So the initiatives that are put forward for 2024 for protective services, there's several of them. 3 of them go with health and safety. So we looking at conducting a noise survey for all county buildings, any equipment that are of concern. Update the health and safety environment manual to reflect current legislation and practices. Create a PPE standard with safety training in that as well. Of course, working together with our contracted peace officers and all community peace officer topics that come forward. Excuse me. Conduct and coordinate a emergency tabletop exercise with county involvement. Coordinate with the fire department officers the update of current standard operating guidelines. That's currently going now, but it's a bigger process, so there's a lot to go over with that. Coordinate regional FD training events with all stations. That has happened this year, and we're looking at doing it more in 2024. So it's more cross-training, making sure that all stations are doing the right training and the same training. Update the fire equipment replacement plan and fire fleet capital plan. There has been talks with Andre on that one. I believe Andre put together some documentation on the capital plan for fleet, and there's been talks with myself and him on the apparatuses that are currently in operation, what it looks like down the road, and what needs to be replaced. There's lifespans on certain fire apparatus that need to be met. Also update and input all current inventory into our software program. We use a FirePro application program. Again, it's a huge undertaking. It's methodical and time consuming. It is happening, but very slowly. So those would be the priorities and initiatives for safety and protective services. Any questions?
So Sheldon, could you speak to your position, you want to add, your half-time position?
So the one half-time position, again, from the initiatives that were brought forward here, it would be a lot more, for an example, inventory, right? Most of the departments have someone that may have some experience going over the inventory and getting me the information, but then is putting it in the system, making sure that it's correct in the system. And then once something is used, it's taken out of the system, so that person can take that initiative on and work the program, because there's a lot there. Along with billing, there's a lot of billing, transportation that we bill out for calls, and documentation. That aspect of things is massive. Another big thing is right now is disaster recovery program, so the DRP, that could be on that position where they deal with the government, going through the documentation, getting the documentation, putting in the system. There's quite a bit to take place. Just the extra help would be very beneficial.
Councilor Prestige?
Through the chair to council. I'm in full favor of the part-time positions, because when we cut back staff, it's really put a lot of pressure on our staff. And if we're not careful, we'll burn our staff out and we'll be looking for new people, for sure.
I agree with you, especially, looking at splitting in between here and helping out our economic development, and he's to the wall all the time with, events and planning and everything else, so somebody else to kind of float back and forth, I would completely support it. I have a question, just kind of looking through our, I guess the package that we have here. What are we expecting the average increase in protective services for as far as a percentage?
So to your worship, so we've kind of jumped the gun. Sheldon kind of jumped the gun on going into his area. We were going to concentrate on the initiatives first and then go into the areas, and we actually have the increases for each department. So he went a little bit ahead of us.
Okay, well, I guess he's up here already, and he's kind of gone through it, if we can,
It's on your page, so protective services is on page, find it, 95?
You say 95?
96.
You got a different 96 than me.
That's a summary.
95 is the PDF.
Like the full breakdowns.
Yeah, I'm going by his department, so for fire services, if you look at if we look at each department he has, under safety, Sheldon's safety budget is a 1.13% increase. That includes the 3% wage increase as is the only initiative there. Under his fire services budget, he has a 4.23% increase. With the new position, it would be 8.12. This is on page 31 of the presentation, if you're wondering where I'm at. So we did each department separately, and they'll go through them when they get to their sections. Emergency management had no increase. Patrol services had a 14.98% increase on page 33, and that's because of the Lac St. Anne contract, and we did not budget enough last year for that large increase in that contract. And then in his, that's at the end of his department. So overall, take that 14.98% increase that Sheldon had no control over. He has very minor overall increases on his base budget. Very close to the 1% level that we asked him to be committed
The
to.
biggest impacts will be the halftime position and the patrol contract with Lac St. Anne.
That's right, and the initiative's in here, so it's outside of his base budget. So it's kind of a different item, and council can say yes or no to this and just have his base budget.
Right, council, any discussion or more council for Sheldon's department? And unfortunately, the contract with Lac St. Anne, we've already approved that. That was higher than we were anticipating, so not much we can do in the budget wise for that, but plan for it this year. Yeah, like we said, we do agree with part-time, so. Are there any other discussion? Anybody want to throw anything else out there? Right. Councilor Wilhelm.
Just for my a better understanding of the information that we have in front of us, so there's a couple different pages here. Like say if we look at page 17, expense changes from 2023 to 2024 budget, you can see here the overall changes to various departments, net increase, budget changes 1%. You guys were sticking around that. From my understanding, this here is not included in the 1% budget changes, right? These are things that we need to agree on that go over and above the 1% budgetary restriction we placed on administration. Just for mine, I didn't know that right now, so it's good to understand that.
Just I guess a point of kind of clarification on it too. If we approved all of this, how much over that 1% are we increasing the operating budget?
So, Your Worship, as I mentioned earlier in one of the earlier pages, it would be 6.89 would be the total increase, so 5.9, I guess.
All right, let's say 6% more over top of that.
Yes.
And as far as from a budgetary number for where we're at, we're looking at the total numbers, how much of an impact is that going to be at the end of the year?
So, Your Worship, the way we seated the budget was we balanced it based on the 1%, then we added the initiatives, which are excess of the 1%, and we still have a $2 million surplus, including the initiatives.
Including the initiative?
Including the initiatives.
Councilor Dean.
Excuse me, that $2 million surplus, does that take into account the allowance for unpaid taxes?
To the chair, to Councillor Dean. So we still have a budget of $1 million for the allowance. The other $2 million has already been used as a resource for the last year's initiatives that are ongoing. So we have $1 million in the budget for allowance for doubtful accounts.
Okay, and what's your best guess that we're gonna be owed?
I would say it's going to be a very small number. We don't have any oil and gas companies hardly left on our records that have an outstanding balance with us. We just signed another new agreement with another oil company. And we have actually one set up in our allowance that thought we were going to have to write off for $520,000. That will be fully paid by the end of December. So we actually have $520 that we're going to reverse in 2023.
So just to follow, you said that we used to budget $3 million, now we're budgeting $1 million?
Yes, that's correct. One, because the other two has been tied up in the other initiatives that you approved last year.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, but for 2024, we're not budgeting $3 million in unpaid taxes?
That's correct. 1 million.
1 million.
1 million.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion from council? Councilor Prestige.
through the chair too, Mr. Rowe. So this 2 million surplus, so that will be our reserve? Pardon?
Through the chair, Prestige. So the way the budget's been done the last 5 years is that anything that's surplus, we to balance the budget, we put as a transfer to operating reserves. And I provided that one little page there, and you can kind of see where those funds go. And that's what the intent with the recovery plan, is those funds are transferred to operating reserves. What we've done is it's just basically grown our bank account. And so our bank account, as of the end of the year, we believe is going to hit the number that was in the recovery plan. So it's kind of a good news story in terms of the fact that we will have a fairly large surplus this year, we believe. And of course, it's partially related to tax revenue.
Councillor Wilhelm.
So just from my understanding and clarification, the budgetation is, or the budget value you're looking for, or tax revenue for 2024 will be based on a 3% tax revenue change, not a tax rate change, right? Not a mill rate change, but an actual revenue increase of 3%.
That's correct. It's based on our 2023 taxes times 3%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else for Sheldon over here? I think you're in the clear there, Sheldon. Economic development.
Your worship, members of council, this is Mr. Birch, Mr. Roach, was unable to attend tonight. So depending if council has any specific questions in regards to his budget, more than likely he'll be back Monday night. But I can speak to the halftime position. This was a request from the Economic Development Committee, and administration supports that based on the activities that Mr. Roach does, and we believe that he can use some assistance.
And I think overall, if you actually look at his budgetary numbers, though, the rest of his budget's fairly stagnant. Anybody have any questions for Gord in regards to the economic development? Okay. Get us over to infrastructure. So we got the big ones. Some questions for you there, Rick.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. Looking at my column here, the first couple they have come up. This is Mr. Frank's directive there to try to reestablish our staffing levels again. So that's those first couple numbers there. Then remuneration, mine looks like it says 5% for infrastructure, but maybe that's a typo. Unless we all agree on 5 now, we could. Okay, so he had mentioned that earlier. The debenture payments, I would ask for any input on that.
Yeah, so through the chair, so we did not assume that you were going to approve both debentures. We just assumed you might approve one debenture. So I used the $2.4 million debenture, and that's half a year costs for that debenture over 20 years. If you want it over 10 years, you could see the cost goes up to about $158,000.
Okay, so I guess a question we had there a little bit earlier, if you could answer, we have the 2 least graders.
Yes. Through the mayor and council. What the 2 graders that were awarded yesterday, I guess, those were the 2023 budgets. They started out originally to be leased, and just through the evolution from spring and reviewing numbers and bids, it was determined that the purchase was the way to go for those 2. So those were the 2023 graders that were awarded yesterday. These are the 2024, and this budget, we've had this number kind of kicked around for a little bit, so it just went in as leased. We didn't change it. We sort of wanted to just bring them up like this, sort of see if you guys have input after last night's meeting. Maybe you want to just change it right away. And this is also kind of getting into that, how we're going to cycle out the equipment, not all in 1 year. So there'd be like 2 this year, then maybe 2 next year, and we'd be kind of breaking up that purchase of 5 at once or 7 at once.
Okay, that's. I know we did have some discussion yesterday around the idea of having one go off for refurb. So we at least had that one in the fleet while we were rolling through them, but I think that'll have to be probably a discussion for, I'm not sure if you want to have that now or later. Councilor Prestige?
Now, that's before me.
Oh, sorry.
Just this number doesn't line up with what I remember from our discussion yesterday. We had a purchase price of 540, I think. 640. Right, yeah, with the extra 12. So where does 300K come from?
I can answer. Your worship, members of council, again, remember in 2023, we were leasing graders and the price for leasing graders are $150,000 per year. Times 2 is 300,000. When we seeded this budget 2 weeks ago, or well, it's over a month ago, we used that same number anticipating that we're gonna lease 2 more graders. Your decision yesterday doesn't change that number, because other than if you're going to purchase those either will be lease graders, or if you purchase, we would recommend that amount of money being put back into your reserves. So after 5 years, you've paid for those units.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Prestige?
Lost my train of thought.
My other question, we have 2 equipment operators. If we're not adding more equipment, do we need more operators?
We do quite often have contracted staff, so that we're keeping them employed, but we're not paying them the benefits, not like full-time permanent, but we do usually have 1 or 2 staff that are kept on through contract, so that would probably eliminate that. And then if we do increase our graders, we may go back to possibly needing contract guys at different times of years, like in the summer, but until then, we would be able to avoid going with those contracted employees.
What's the cost comparison between what we're doing for contracted employees versus an extra $84,000 for a new employee?
Probably, Andrew, I think just the benefits would be the,
Yeah, your worship, I wouldn't be able to give you a number off the top of my head.
I mean, are they comparable to what we're paying? You know, like close to it, or are we paying, $40,000 a year for a contract employee?
Yeah, your worship, members of council know we're paying current market price, and again, based on the experience of the end of it, right? So ultimately, an experienced operator would be comparable to the price that we got.
That's what I was
Yeah.
curious. If we're paying that in a contract for somebody already versus just having them on staff with the benefits, that's kind of a wash in the end.
But again, if they're an inexperienced individual that is in training, we pay them less, and as they gain experience, we compensate them.
Councilor Prestige?
Yeah, through the chair, if we hold 1 grader back as a spare, doesn't mean we have to do a refurbishing this year. It could be, wait till next year. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be a spare, so it doesn't have to be refurbished right away.
And Andrew, we got the 300 in the budget line. There'll still be an RFD comes forward before we make that decision, would be my understanding, right? Yeah. Any other discussion from council? Councilor Wilhelm?
Rick, with the flush camera line stuff, what's that, those items all about?
through the chair to Councilor Wilhelm. Are we done on the graders there, like?
Yeah.
Okay, just to keep it, just to go back to that briefly, is to keep so that we are changing equipment, not all at the same time, like we do one this year, or a couple this year, and if we could do a couple next year, we'd be on track in a few years, so. Okay, going down to your question there, Councilor Wilhelm, the flushing of the sewer lines in both the hamlets, I guess, what's your question, what is it about, or?
Yeah, like
Yeah, so we hire a contractor, they have it's a flushing truck, similar to a hydrovac type thing, but they have tracked equipment. They'll go down, they'll clean all the sanitary sewers, and then they'll go down and they'll drive through the sewers cammering all the services coming in, the manholes, and they can mark, within like inches of where there's issues, and then they produce a report that goes into Steve's department, and then that can help them plan possibly for future large replacements or issues coming up.
Oh, they do evaluations on the line as
Yeah,
well?
yes, yeah, they have quite an involved evaluation with that report. Yeah.
Leonardo did that.
So we had done those in the past every 3 years, and I think we're getting close to maybe between 4 to 5 years now since we've done it. So the fort lines are probably overdue to be looked at. They have issues for sure. So and just the cleaning of it makes it's good insurance for us as well.
Okay, I guess that's our new initiatives for infrastructure. Does council want to,
So,
go ahead.
Through the mayor and council. There is a little bit of a change here. On the very next line, if you look to the right, there's $15,000 for coal mine hill cleaning. If I'm not mistaken, I think that'll be coming over to our column here. But that'll be just over the lookout there. It's accumulated with all sorts of appliances and carcasses and whatnot. So it's been a few years since we've actually had people go down there and retrieve that stuff. So that's what we're looking at trying to do with that, is to clean that up a bit. So that would just shift over that 15 grand.
Councilor Prestige?
Through the chair to Rick. On Coal Mine Hill, going down the hill, the guardrail, the sand and stuff that builds up, will that get cleaned out too, or?
We have done a little bit. I think that should be a bit bigger of a project. A lot of people look at the guardrail and it appears low. Is actually what's happening is we've got so much of a buildup that we should go in and cut out 6 to 8 inches probably, and then reestablish that grade at some point. Yes.
So that's not part of this?
Not specifically, no. No, this is just for the garbage and debris that people are dumping over the banks. It's a bit of a special project that we can't just go grab a couple, we'll get the right equipment and try to do it all at once.
Council?
Oh, I was just thinking, can we not throw a sign like "Smile, you're on camera" and not put any up? So they don't break them? But this illegal dumping thing has been going on forever.
Sandhills are in rough shape too.
Right.
Yeah, there's a, it's frustrating. People take the time and effort to load it up and drive out in the bush.
Yeah.
It's just easier to take it to the landfill anyways, it's already in the truck.
It costs $5.
Councilor Wilhelm?
I'm just gonna roll back. I apologize again. I'm just lots of information going through here. So, just for my full understanding, 2023 we're gonna purchase new graders, right? The idea is to purchase. Next year it would probably be cost prohibitive to buy 2 new graders. So the idea then would be to lease a set of graders instead of, because how many in total do we need to replace?
Through the chair, Councilor Wilhelm, we currently have 5.
Yeah.
So, and they're all the same age. They're all, we feel, aged, ready to go. So, yes, we are purchasing for 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And like Mr. Frank had mentioned, that the leasing was established in here like a month back when we were doing the budget, because at that point we didn't know about the purchase of these graders, what the status was. So we just left that as lease.
Okay.
We'd be more than open to going back to any of those options again, like a rebuild instead, or a purchase or a lease. This has been there, so we didn't want to change it until it comes to you guys, and then they'd be up for discussion on maybe what direction we'll go.
Okay.
Councilor Prestige?
Thank you.
Through the chair. These 2 graders that we're buying, they're for the 2024 budget, not the 23 budget.
No, the 2 that we're purchasing are in the 23 budget.
No, because we're discussing the 24 budget.
Yeah, these ones, but the ones that we, from yesterday's council meeting, that was the 24 budget. Or the 23 budget, not the 24 budget.
I thought the 23 budget was finalized, done.
Oh, we just
they're
finalized
commodities.
the
We're not buying 2 more in 24, in 25.
No, it might.
Through the mayor to council. That is.
Reeve.
Sorry, the reef to council. Yes, those, at the start of 2023, we had the money earmarked as leased, and like I say, just through the, in our original RFDs and where we got to, it turned out that a purchase. So these are the 2023s that were awarded yesterday. So now, for the 2024, we are proposing to carry on and updating our fleet. Is that proposal?
Councillor Burrows and Councillor Dean.
So through the chair, I guess, help me understand how, if we're doing a lease on the equipment, this would be what, like an annual lease, a 2-year lease, a 5-year lease, something like that? Like what, and this would have changed my mind on the purchasing of these, on the decision we made the other day on the 2 other graders. Had I known that now we're looking at leases on these ones. And this is why I keep saying we have to look at our equipment as an overall fleet instead of this year-to-year thing. It's driving me nuts. So I don't know what the plan is to replace 5 graders over a period of what years, and where do you want to stagger them out to, and how does leasing machinery get us staggered because they're lease machines? Like you know what I mean? Like I don't have a grand plan for the equipment. I understand that we're getting, you know, some newer equipment, but I'd like to have a bigger picture here.
Through the reef to Councillor Burrows. I agree. Again, when we did our budget for the 2023, with our constraints and numbers, we went with the lease. We didn't necessarily think that would be ideal, but it fit the budget. And again, this saying we're leasing, that is just been carried over from when we started this budget. We're not saying that's maybe our preferred. We just left that since it was set up in the budget as that would, for the purchase after reviewing it all. And we had different lease terms given to us when we were collecting all the numbers, and it still was looking that the purchase was the best bang for the buck. So we're more than open to be looking at a purchase as opposed to leasing.
Well,
Go ahead.
yeah, and I get what you're saying. I understand that, but had I known that, so if the option was lease 2, purchase 2, and you flip 24 and 23, I would have leased 2 and 23 when we got all the supply chain problems, all the cost increases, and all the other stuff that's going on. I'd have leased those 2 machines and waited until 2024 to buy 2 other machines. That's the point I'm trying to make, because as time ticks on, our supply chain gets more and more robust, things kind of come back in place. And I mean, the price difference that we saw in change from August, I think the RFP came in, and the last one was nearly $100,000 each on the graders for a cost change. So, and again, this is why I say, like, we've got to start looking at some of these fleets overall. It's not anything you did. Like I'm trying to talk big picture here. So
I see Andrew's got your hand up, and then Councillor Dean.
Through the chair to Councillor Burrows, I just wanted to, so Andre did have a plan for replacing the graders on last night's meeting. He did give the plan. Originally, we did not think the council was going to support buying graders, so when he came to, we didn't even plan that in the budget. So our plan now is Andre's going to purchase those graders out of the capital reserve, and this money that we call lease, $300,000, is staying in the budget, but it's going to be called transfer to reserves now to fund those. Every year, we're going to fund those graders with this, what we call lease in this budget, but technically, if we buy them, it'll be transferred to reserves to fund it over time. So that we're always refunding that money into the equipment placement reserve. So that was Andre's intent, was to buy those graders and over the next 4 years, pay for them out of that lease money that's already been approved by council last year.
Councillor Dean, and then I think Rick's got a.
Yeah, and that, thanks, Andrew. That's exactly what I remember Andre saying. That's what I was going to bring up. He also had indicated yesterday that the 5 graders would likely be replaced over 3 years, 2 the first year, 2 the second year, and then we'd have 1. So that was the plan that I heard him say. He had a spreadsheet there with refurb, with lease, and with purchase. And the purchase had 2 options, either a 5-year warranty or a 7-year warranty. And we decided to go with the purchase with the 7-year warranty. So I think the plan was actually pretty well laid out. And he did tell us that they would be funded through the reserves, and the reserves would be paid back much like you would with a lease. So all that information came out yesterday.
Just, Rick,
Rick back through the Reeve to Council. Yeah, as you mentioned, the leases were part of that, the options that were presented. I'd like to verify that prices, I thought they might even have come down, or I don't think they changed very much from the last time we had the quoted price from the manufacturers.
Councillor Prestige and over to Councillor Burrows.
Chair. So, we're paying cash for the two graders in 2023. So if we buy, or we don't have the money to buy them for 2024, because it's not in the budget. And do we have the money in reserves to buy two more graders in 2024?
$2 million.
So through the chair to Councillor Prestige, that'll be up to council to decide, just like you did last night. It does take out of reserves and it's funded over 4 years. So you'll get the funds back, but you will have to come up with the cash up front.
But there's also a chance, if we do look at graders closer to the end of next year again, that our financial position, we might have, a little bit of a surplus or something sitting there too that we can reallocate to it as well. Councillor Burrows, and then
Yeah, my point is on this, when you put it in there that it's a lease, that's different than what we were talking about on the equipment replacement of buying and staggering, so that's where the confusion is coming in for me. If you put a line item in there that you're gonna fund new equipment purchases through transfers to reserves, then okay, but that's not what it says.
Yeah, you're, through the worship to Councillor Burrows, you're correct. We had to close out the budget at some point in time so I can close out the budget. I never heard about the purchase of graders until 3 days ago, so that's the challenge. Like, I didn't know we were purchasing graders, so we went forward with what we have. And that's my only explanation, is that's all we had. That's all I knew at the time we prepared the budget.
Councillor Wilhelm.
I apologize, I told you guys I'd leave at 7, but I just wanted to comment. I trying to remember back to that RFD, the original one with regards to the leasing the graders, but I just want to support administration here. This is what we asked them for, what we got yesterday. He came forward with an RFD to lease graders, and we said, oh, well, we want to subcontract these graders out, or maybe we want to purchase them. Bring that information to us, and it took time to come to us, and we decided we wanted to buy them. But all that information of the schedule to replace the graders and the money that it was going to require came out in the original RFD, and we told them we want other options. We want to know what it costs to contract a grader beat out, and we want to know what it costs to purchase the graders and what that financial impact is.
Councillor Dean and Councillor Coogan.
Yeah, in the rationale for the RFD from yesterday's meeting, it's Thursday today, right? Yeah, yesterday's meeting. So in the rationale, it says, for the purchase options, the interest on borrowing costs was included. However, there are currently over $2 million in the equipment replacement reserve. So there's excess funds. And I mean, that reserve also goes to pickup trucks and various other things, but so that, yeah, that information was there.
Okay, Councillor Coogan.
Yeah, and my perception of this was completely different than yours, Councillor Wellen, because what we asked for, the reason we asked for contracting services was to understand what the difference was, because we didn't even have the numbers of what a grader cost annually or otherwise. So this lease item in here, that I have to agree, it has nothing to do with administration. It has to do with the communication of the whole thing over this period of time. And I think administration is struggling with that as well, because they didn't have those numbers. They never ever had a quote out. So we asked for that, and the reason we asked for that was because we had a $1.5 million request for graders originally on RFD, and like Councilor Burrows says, it's now $100,000 cheaper, and maybe as this economy becomes more robust, and that's why the conversation was about planning longer term. And so I think I was not confused about the fact that the money came out of the 2023 budget, but I was definitely confused about the fact that when it was in here as a lease, because it doesn't say. So I think that was the reason we got to the point we're at right now. And so as long as we're trying to work with administration, try to figure out what the best option forward is, I think that's what the intent is.
And as administration said, right now, this is just laid over verbiage in there.
And if I could, the idea of a lease, and I look at the budget and the way they're, some of the debentures are worked in, and that, you look at these $2 million debentures, they're not looking at it as a $2 million debenture, they're looking at it as 300,000 borrowing a year annually, trying to keep that percentage down. So the leasing thing at 300,000, if that's leasing actual cash and 300,000 in 2024 budget, then that's all the cash there is there. So if we actually go and purchase 2 new graders in 2024, that's another 1.25 million that we got to come up with. Now, over time, we'll replenish that to the equipment reserve, but we still have to come up with that money. So there's either going to be another debenture, or you're doing $1.6 million in spending in that period of time. So in 2024, that's why I'm saying, like, when you write down 300,000 as a lease, that's a if you just lease the machine, you don't have to buy the whole thing up front. It's just 300 grand a year, 300, right? And then at the end, you hand it back, but you got no machine left. That's the whole idea of leasing. And it's to keep that annual cost down. So when I see the 300,000 in there, that's not a new machine. That's not 2 new graders, like we talked about the other day. That's 2 leased machines.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking at. If we're gonna buy 2 machines in 2024, then put 1.2 million in the budget. Like, that's the honest number. Am I looking at this wrong?
Through the chair to Councilor Burrows, no. In final budget in March, you would see 1.2 million in the budget. But this budget had to be locked down 10 days ago to get any of the paperwork done. So we can't fly, that fast and make a budget change. But the final budget will reflect whatever council decides. So it'll have everything in that you've changed. So your decision last night changed the budget for next year.
Okay,
But we haven't had time to change the budget.
Okay,
now we're fine.
no, I'm good.
Okay. So that line is really 1.2?
Okay.
Yeah. Or it could be 300, depending on what we want to do. There's an RFD that'll come forward just similar to the one that he presented at yesterday's meeting, and we'll make a decision.
And at the end of the year, if we find we don't have 1.2 and we can't do it, we push 2 graders to 2025.
Or by 1.
Or 1, or
Yeah.
do the refurb and start rotating stuff. I guess while Rick's up, there's anything else, I guess, under the, while you're up here, the department summary that we should, or have we basically covered everything this time?
Well, I think that's just the highlights in this table that we wanted to talk about at this point.
I guess, do we want to continue with the highlights, or while Rick's up here, just continue to his department?
Yeah, he's there now.
If you want to go through Rick's presentation, then you need to go to
Page
page
33.
You got 33, you're saying?
33, 34.
Yeah, the notes.
page 34.
On Monday, guys.
Page 34 of the presentation.
All teams in.
If you don't mind, Rick, I figure you're up here already, you're on a roll, so.
Okay. What page are you?
34.
Page 34.
Different page 34 than we do.
You probably have a different order. You're 32.
Oh, this one here, okay.
Can screen to where he is, so that we're all up here?
He's on there right now.
Yeah, okay.
Through the even council. I don't know if you want me to go through and read all this. This is just sort of a summary of our infrastructure and what we focus on with the roads and what we service, the bridges, snow plowing, the graders, the equipment. Just an overview of where we spend our time and money. And if you guys want to go into any of those details, we certainly can.
Council? Looks like we can kind of keep moving on here.
Okay. So the priorities and initiatives on the next page. One of the main focuses will be going back, looking at the re-gravel program to try to get back to where we were. We had cut back quite a bit last year on the re-gravel, so we'd like to go back to our previous numbers on that and get that going again. We're somewhere around about a third of the roads being re-graveled every year, so we'd like to focus on that this year. This is one from last year, conduct and review best practices for infrastructure service operations. So I think we're trying to keep our service levels as good as we can for what we have and can work with and our people. Number 3 here will be, well, that's tied into some of those debentures, and it will be some of the next few years projects coming up, but looking at the aging asphalt and overlays and keeping up on that. There was, I'm not sure if this has come up, but there was an assessment done on all the asphalt roads here, so there is a report sort of identifying the recommendations for the asphalt that we have. So Andre will be bringing that up, I think, when he has that list of the future roads or expenses.
Councillor Dean, got a question there?
Yeah, I could just jump in. So there was an analysis done on the asphalt roads. Would it support the request that's made for these debentures?
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, that was part of the basis of these 2 debentures based on that report.
Because that's a document that would be useful for us to see if we're being asked to make a decision on a debenture.
Councillor Coogan?
Yeah, through the chair to Richard. Now that you have the inventory of the roads, has there been any consideration to start a road shoulder pull program?
Through the Region Council. Not at this point. Again, our budget is, we're still at the one, so we're trying to stay within those confines, and we're sort of trying to, like I say, until we get maybe given the go-ahead or direction on that's what we want to look at. So with our 1%, we're just kind of, we're working within that for now.
In the budget, if a person were to bring back the shoulder pull program, how much a year is that typically?
Oof, I wouldn't be able to answer that honestly right now with a good answer.
Could you could you give us a ballpark figure in that, so that we what you guys see as possible shoulder pulls? Because those are long-term fixes, and maybe it's something we should, as a council, be looking at maybe initiating again.
At least starting some of the year. Councillor Prestige?
Through the chair, those asphalt reviews we did, when was that? That was 3 years ago?
No, I believe there was one recently done. It's quite up to date. Yeah.
This year.
Yeah, just this fall actually.
Yeah, because I know we looked at some before that, and it's falling in place what the plan was.
So by your memory, then they're due for overlays according to this schedule?
I think East Mountain West Mountain, I think was actually due a couple of years ago. And a big chunk of that, we just been kind of pushing it off.
We just did.
did see that.
We did a major repair last year
Yeah.
on West Mountain.
On a section of it, yeah.
But the lifespan of a paved road is 20 to 25 years.
Yeah,
Pretty easy to figure out when you're gonna have to do it.
right. It's just that road was built in sections, right? It wasn't all built at the same time.
I continue the road.
Okay, just through Region Council again. Going back to that, that was the Horse Creek Road, the one that we did this year. That was, I think, based on that previous one, and it was, I think it was like 25 years. It had a great life, but it was definitely due. And these debentures, they're looking at a portion of East Mountain. This eastern, the part where you leave here just east of town, that first portion, I think up to the curve, and then also West Mountain, probably from where they finished last year, coming up to the town boundary. are these two debentures. So they are, yeah, looking at sections of it and basing it on that. But they're all 20 some years around there right now, yeah. Okay. And then going back to our initiatives and priorities, ensure capital projects are tendered in a timely manner for optimum bid pricing. So for us, for the equipment, once the budgets are approved, we find it's usually the best to try to get out those bids and try to get things teed up for the construction season coming up. Or if we wait later in the year, a lot of the contractors, they'll just bid really high because they've got work, and if they get it, great. If not, then, so ideally with an approved budget early, that helps us get this stuff going in the chute. So we'd like to keep on that. And then continuing, we've just recently started this year with the replacement of our fleet vehicles and trying to get them a little more up to date. We have a few old ones that we will get into more once we look at the capital budget. We have some of the information for the ones we want to replace. And one that isn't on your list, but I did mention it previously, is that Coal Mine Hill cleanup was one of our initiatives as well.
Okay. Any other questions for Richard from council? Sorry, Councilor Prestige.
Through the chair, Rick, on that Coal Mine Hill initiative, are you gonna cut some of the trees down too, or just clean up the garbage?
Through the REIT council. At this point, we were just discussing going down to retrieve all the debris and garbage there. I think we'd want to look at the trees. I know some of them have come down, but some of them also provide a bit of bank stabilization as well. So we might be a little hesitant to cut too much of the vegetation out of there. So we're ideally focusing on the garbage that people are putting down there at this point.
Because what's happening is the trees are growing up and it's not much of a viewpoint anymore, because you can't see anything for the trees.
I could entertain maybe like at a certain level, you know, if you go up there, and you might still leave 20 foot of tree and maybe have them topped, just at that where the pullout is, but it'd be nice to keep the rest there, going down.
Okay, any other questions? Swirl.
Your Worship, I just called up the shoulder pull costs. For 2012, they were 251,000. 2013 was 342. 2014 was 417,000, and 2015 was 174,000, and then it dropped off after that. Basically 15 or 16 on it. Basically very, very low expenditures.
Right.
I'm just thinking about that. We could maybe come up with a cost per kilometer, and maybe if we're saying, okay, we want to spend 100 grand on shoulder pulls, and okay, we can do this much per kilometer, we can do that many kilometers, and then we would look at identifying the biggest candidates and go from there probably.
That'd be great. We really appreciate it.
That's what I want to hear. Perfect.
That's asset management.
What's that?
That's
That's
asset
asset
management.
management.
Well, that could tie into it where, okay, we've got 50 kilometers, we go back to our asset management that we've gone through and analyzed and pick the worst candidates out of there and make sure that they are
Yep.
needing that, and then go from there.
Anything else, council? Okay, I guess if that's it for this one, we'll move on to the airport.
Cool, okay.
And you got some more?
Well, there's another page that, are we?
Yeah,
just
Is there
carrying
another
on?
page for you?
No, roads and sidewalks, yeah, he's got
Sidewalk?
roads
Okay,
and sidewalks.
sorry.
Well, this is actually the next page I have here is just more highlighting the changes. Like I say,
Right.
we didn't have a big change in our budget. We're still within that 1%. So just to highlight, instead of going through all the lines, these are kind of the significant changes. The equipment operators previously mentioned, wage increase, the additional capital, lower contract services. So I think he's looking at having a little bit less of a contract coming out this year. The sale of the graders would be some revenue we would have, and a water crossing grant, that's for that culvert study. I think we awarded that this year already. And increase in capital, I'm not too sure where that would come from.
Just a general increase over the previous year.
Okay.
If you take a look at, the anticipated sale for the two graders, it covers about 3/4 of the cost for a new one. With the money we have sitting there, we could look in the fall, if we sold the two graders instead of sending one off for a rebuild out of those two, it would be a couple $100,000 extra to put in to get another replacement grader, to put 3 new ones in the fleet, and we would still have that third one instead of selling for a spare or something at that point also. So it might be a way, if you take a look at that 412,000 to, when it comes up to that point, to utilize it for possibly another piece of equipment.
But this is identified as revenue to balance,
Yeah,
balance your
see
budget,
that.
right?
Yeah.
So
It's not
it's
free
not
money.
just equipment, it rolls back in as general revenue kind of deal?
Yeah, I
So-
didn't take that into account.
I know what you mean, but.
Yeah. Council Prestige?
Through the chair, I thought when Andre was speaking yesterday, the sale of the graders goes into reserves. From the equipment reserve.
Through the chair to Councillor Prestige, that's not how he budgeted his, he didn't budget into reserves.
You said we were gonna replenish the reserves each year.
Through the lease revenue, through the lease costs, he was gonna replenish it through the lease budget that we have in infrastructure, the 300,000, but the 412, right now, he has going into general revenue. And that could change if you want to change the budget, of course, but that's where he has it right now.
Because I thought I heard him say it was going, the sale of the graders would go into the reserve.
Yeah,
Equipment reserve fund.
that's what he said.
Yeah, it's not how he, that's not how he's budgeted, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Me?
Okay, and increased debenture cost, that I guess is for the paving that we did this year. And he's anticipating a little bit higher legal costs, I think just going off the historicals and trying to get the budget numbers tighter. And of course, increased utility costs, carbon tax. In there, okay. If we go to the next page, this is the one I thought we were looking at. This is kind of the highlights of what we're changing, the small changes in the infrastructure budget here. So we have the 2 operators that are proposed, the positions, and the leasing of the graders, which could become maybe a purchase or whatever at this point. The wage increase, decrease. So okay, so that next one, I guess, is when we do the annual reviews of the staff, if there's possible some merit increases, if they're to stay within their range, sometimes they get increases. So we're gonna reduce our culvert repairs. We did a fair bit this year, went out and tried to clean a bunch of the ends and cleaned out the actual culverts. We were sort of focusing this year on the culverts, so we're gonna reduce that cost. And like I said, we were looking at more re-gravel. We're gonna increase our brushing, and we're probably gonna start that up here anytime now. We do have the mulcher that we put onto our track hoe, and I think we're gonna rent a demo for the skid steer, and just it'll tackle a little bit more of the willowy small stuff, where the mulcher is a little bit better on the bigger trees. So we're just gonna try that for a week and see if how that performs. So we'll be starting that right away. And without any snow cover, it's a perfect time for it too. There's an increase in mowing, and that is one of the contracts that Dawn administers, and that's, I guess it's the full cut coming up this year, so there's an increase every 3rd year. I believe they're still on that, where they do a partial, full, so that's the full year. And we're increasing the re-gravel, so we're anticipating that we're gonna be able to reduce our budget on patch gravel. And then the next line is that re-gravel increase I talked about. And our signs, they've done their full circle of life, and we're pretty constantly changing all the blue signs. All the south-facing ones have turned completely white by now. So those are getting changed. The other ones are even starting to go. And Ed, how old do you think those are? Do you remember? They're like 10, 12? Yeah, so they've had a good run, but they're not getting stolen or shot like our stop signs, but they are just wearing them. So a lot of them you can't even read when you pull up to them. So that's an ongoing process. And an increase in the snow removal, just with the increased cost of the salt and the materials. So those are the highlights of where we're in our budgets, what we're changing. I think we're still within our 1% the last time I seen, unless there were other changes, I'm not sure.
So, Your Worship, members of council, so in this case, this department is over budget, but we've netted it against other departments, and we've heard the message quite clearly that roads are our major focus. So with 2 new operators and hopefully an increased service level, we've transferred some of our costs to infrastructure from other areas.
Councillor Prestige?
Through the chair to Rick, do we have anything in the budget for repairing sidewalks in the hamlets?
We do have some in there, like offhand, I think it's like 5,000-10,000, but we haven't had a lot of concrete repairs required. We did do a few this year in Blue Ridge. Did we do a little bit in the Fort, or we're just looking at? Yeah, and then like the whole Main Street in Fort, they did a fair bit of work on there too, which was kind of nice that we didn't have to pay for.
Because I know in Blue Ridge, when we did our road tour,
There's some spots that are pretty
there's some
bad.
spots that are really bad. And I get people questioning me about them all the
Okay.
time.
Yeah, we do have some money we haven't done a lot of concrete work over the last few years, but yeah, we definitely do keep some there. So we could be repairing some panels and curbs and stuff. Yeah.
Any other questions for Richard? Not seeing, I guess you're in the clear. We'll move on to airport.
Can you take 2 minutes?
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll set up. Come back at 7:35.
Beat you to it.
I read your mind.
You're up there now.
Perfect.
You know, that one.
Okay, we are good to go.
So to go over the initiatives, basically for the airport is airport certification related expenses, audits, and emergency exercises. So some of the requirements for a certified airport are, I need to get caught up on, is taking this position over not being and learning. There's some stuff that I know that we need to get done, and trying to stay within the 1% for the last couple of years. I haven't been able to get the tabletops done, full-blown emergency exercises, all my audits that I need to get done by a third party. So we just had a process inspection audit done by Transport Canada. So I no longer can push this. I have to get these things done. So that's why that initiative is in there for the, to keep our certification for the airport.
So you guys, the 52.5 for the airport is just, it's something that we've been pushing off, and it's for part of our certification that we can't push off anymore.
And then the other stuff for my other department, the flushing the lines for the sewer, Rick already covered that fairly well.
Wait, I guess if you're up there, if you want to run through your priorities and initiatives, and we'll just shoot a whole bunch of questions your way here right after.
I can do that. So for 2024, our priorities and initiatives is, as mentioned before, is the certification requirements for the QA audits to make sure I am where I need to be, and then that also then leads into all of the different manuals that I have to maintain. The audits shows where we're lacking on our manuals, which case then I can get them updated to where we need to be. Back when we did our overlay in 2012, there was some deficiencies in the line painting, and they were identified underneath the audit that we just received from Transport Canada. So I've got to get those fixed, and I know we're looking at doing a overlay in 25. Andre, I think I talked to you previous about this. I have tried to talk to the transport inspectors on letting me leave the paint as is till that happens. Unfortunately, they're not going to let me. So I have to change some lines up so that they actually meet TP 312 5th edition. Looking at spraying some areas in the back to control the trees. Since we changed direction from the groundbreaking, I do need to take care of some of the vegetation to keep it from growing up. And then once again, we're always looking at to pursue developing of the CYZU airport and other promotional opportunities to get our airport out there and get it noticed. We've had a lot of positive feedback on the new logo that we've developed for the CYZU airport. So we'll just keep building off that and building our brand.
Okay, any questions for on the airport here? Not seeing any. None. Okay, I guess that's it.
He does water and sewer.
Okay, so we'll move on to our utilities then.
So we touched on the
Scoping.
yeah, that's a major one that we need to. It ties into the asset management too, because it looks at our sewer system, lets us know where the major repairs need to be done at. So for our for water, wastewater, and solid waste, at the airport reservoir building out at the airport, we're looking at with the restructuring of everything, we have an office out there for 2 utility operators. It was initially supposed to be a storage room, so we're looking at adding a window and a door into their office, so it's a little bit more usable for them for that facility. Flushing Cameron runs again. We have, through the Flushing and Cameron previously, we have identified an area in Fort Assiniboine that is critical and needs to get repaired. We did have some money budgeted for the 23 budget. However, when we got an estimate on it, it turned out to be considerably more than what we had budgeted. So we're taking that money and adding some more to it, and we've got to get that fixed for next year. We're looking at repairing 2 air reliefs valves on the force main in Blue Ridge. We had one that failed this year, which caused a leak. And when we went through and looked at them all, we found that 2 have a slight leak, and those need to get looked at and fixed for next year. And for solid waste, we just, the ash pile in the Doris Creek transfer site needs to get taken out of there. It's built up quite a bit over the years. So that's the biggest highlights for water, wastewater, and solid waste.
Any questions on that? Alrighty, so that brings us to, says planning, plans, and ASB. Thank you, Steve.
Community service next?
Oh, I was just going off this one here.
Okay.
See, it's different than the other one here. So it's 60-61. Planning and development.
So, for planning and development, so our major thing there is the aerial photography and the contour maps that we would like to obtain this year. So some of the goals and objectives for this year are to continue to support the public on all planning related matters. And those aerials contours are a huge assistance when it comes to speaking with your residents and of course doing approvals and for development and subdivision applications. Early to new year, our consultant is going to present to council the final airport vicinity protection area plan, as well as the development guidelines and transportation study. That same consultant, HM Aero and ISL, will also be doing a presentation, an information session as to activities at the airport and what's what. And that was per council's request. They'd like to do that presentation first before we follow through on the AVPA discussions. Our draft municipal development plan, we've had several open houses this year, so just looking to aim for the first reading in December of the document once we've got it finalized, with adoption hopefully early in the new year. And then, of course, starting the review of the land use bylaw, which will include public consultation, again, public hearing, and adoption, probably later in the year. We'd also, in January, like to start discussions with the town of Whitecourt on the intermunicipal development plan. Again, the consultant will complete the IDP, and we'll include in that same avenue public consultation, public hearing, and then adoption.
Just one question for you. I know this is something that we put off a bunch. The aerial photos.
Mm-hmm.
How many years have we put that off?
They were last done in 2020.
It's been a few years.
Yeah, your worship, members of council, we try to do them every 3 years, so you got a consistent base followed, but
do have a little bit of a win in our back pocket with respect to those. That's providing that Yellowhead County follows through in their budget process for the request, is that we can do what's called consortium. When there's another municipality that's looking to update their stuff at the same time, we could possibly see a $41,000 savings, provided that Yellowhead County follows through and it enacts the whole budget for this year as well.
Any questions for Joan on? Go ahead.
Through the chair to Joan, what is the number right now that's being contemplated for the area photos?
About 180,000.
Okay.
So that includes aerials for the entire municipality, for the hamlets, and then the contour maps for the entire municipality.
And so there's a possibility to reduce that by about 40K.
Yeah.
Anything else? You got anything else, Joan? Another department you're working on too?
Oh yeah, I got lots.
All right. You're in cemeteries and stuff also, aren't you?
Oh yeah, you bet. Cemeteries is pretty much status quo. Just,
Shows no increase, budget
yeah, there's no
20,400.
increase in that, yeah.
Maybe page 44 is the FCSS.
I don't have page numbers on mine, so.
Joe, for
Sorry?
numbers.
What is it?
5051.
51, okay, gotta go backwards, sorry. Okay, so community services, priorities. So currently, we have a 3-year agreement with Barhead District, FCSS. They're looking for an increase, and they will be doing a presentation to council on December 6th, just with respect to what that increase entails. So as part of our needs assessment that was completed early this year, it was determined that there's significant need within the Fort Assiniboine and Goose Lake areas with the older population. And there's more and more of those services being used by those particular residents. Barhead FCSS currently provides services for about $12,500. And what they're suggesting is an increase to $58,000 over a period of time to essentially have 2 days service within the hamlet of Fort Assiniboine, where then seniors aren't traveling all the way to Barhead. They'll be able to go and have whatever their needs are serviced right in the hamlet. Myself and Heather have been looking at different venues as to where that could possibly take place. We were kind of thinking maybe the old Trident building, where Bridge to Care is looking to open up. We thought that might be an ideal and a good combination of the two uses. Increase in library budget, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Dean.
Sorry.
So just to expand on that, so Barhead would provide the services and we would reimburse them?
That's correct, yes. And that's what the current agreement that we have is that, yeah, they in turn, they get the $12,500 from us to provide those services. And then they also, if there's additional home care services, generally ask us or invoice us for those as well. But there's been nothing over and above that 12.5 that's come through that I've seen. The additional funds will to provide additional services, yeah, and more localized because they'll be right in the community.
And I think Heather said that 80% of it is funded from revenue on the other side of the equation, so. Yeah.
I do have just one quick question for you here, and then I'll get to you, Peter.
That's great.
I'm just looking at our budget there, it shows 179,000 from last year in 2023 for FCSS. This year, wages alone are over our last year's budget. it's showing an increase with the FCS to Barhead of just about 25% in that budget line.
I think that's at 45.5.
That's that 45,000.
Yeah, well, but if you look at last year's budget, it was 179,482, and this year it's showing wages at 180. Like, we're over last year's budget alone on his wages.
No, that wage increase, your worship, is the increase of $699. So it's just changing the budget by $699 to get to the base. And then those other activities reflect what happens in the department.
Okay, so I just
Yeah,
read that
yeah.
wrong, sorry. Councillor Cooley, you have a question?
Yeah, that's, what's Surface Pro?
So, Heather desperately needs a new
Yeah,
computer.
it's a new
Oh,
surgery.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it's-
I'm just sitting there going, what the heck is that?
So
And it's-
actually through FCSS, she is eligible. So we have to budget for it, of course, and show it on the books. But it will be 100% brought back
Okay.
to us through
Good.
the FCSS funds that we receive.
Any other questions for Joan? Anything else, Joan?
Okay, library budget. What we're looking,
Boards too.
or, sorry, boards.
Boards, yeah. 7071.
Okay.
Page 56.
So the, community, or is recreation boards,
Yes.
sorry. There is, of course, the capital grants that the Community Services Board has reviewed and approved. So those figures are like for Ensemble and Egg Society, a value of $98.5026. It's for kitchen equipment upgrades and flooring, which is indicated at the bottom of your big sheet here. Blue Ridge Community League, some kitchen upgrades in the value of about $22,000 roughly. Port Assiniboine Agricultural Society, some PRV piping for their ice plant. Whitecourt and District Ag Society, access control system for the equestrian center, about $2,588. And, which totals about $38,673 for those grants. And then showing on that same form there, the Whitecourt Curling Club had come to us in 2023. There's been no request this year, so that's been taken out of the budget. And there's also a further reduction in those capital grants, just that there was less asked for this year than there was last year.
Any questions from council? No? What you got next for us, John?
Okay, what do we got here?
Library, 7074.
Library, okay, we'll go to the library.
Page 59.
We have got, our new programming at the library. So again, through the needs assessment, it was determined that our libraries are the hub of the community. So what we're proposing is that we get into a new agreement with the Blue Ridge Library in particular, provide them some additional funds, perhaps hire an individual that can do some additional programming, whether that be for, and it could entail for seniors, kids, teens, adults, whatever they can come up with. Like I know right now that the library, they provide different services like movie nights.
They do actually a lot of different programming for
Yeah,
different ages there. Art nights, or they did art nights, paint nights. They do, the movie nights for the kids, a lot of summer programming and stuff too. And they do a lot there.
Yeah, so we'd like to get into an agreement with the Woodlands Library Board, provide them that additional funding so that they can enhance that programming that they currently provide, yeah. So that's the biggest one, it's a $40,000 one. And then,
I would say just so that this council's aware, I think it's been at least 10 years since they've had an increase in their budget, they've been running the same numbers, so.
As far as the arts and cultures grant, essentially we just want to return to the 2019 level, so adding about $5,000. Because what we were finding is that we're being oversubscribed from some of the ones that are making application. And yeah, so we just want to get back up to the level where we were from 2019. So that's what the additional funds are there. And this one, I wasn't sure, sorry, it said lower the building maintenance by 5,000. I meant to ask Mark and Andre, but I didn't get an opportunity to ask that question, so I'm not certain what that was.
Yeah, your worship members of council, that's just based on what we've been spending historically. So we try to get the budget in line with what we're actually spending for costs and get the budget in line. So sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down.
Any questions? No? What you got next, Joan?
That might be it, Joe.
I think that was it.
Yeah.
Oh, Blue Ridge Family Fun Day. Under Parks and Rec, which is, it's a programming thing. So Blue Ridge Family Fun Day, we're just asking for an additional $5,000 there. Very popular event. It seems to increase each year. Draws a lot of young families out there from all around. And I know she's got some awesome ideas she'd like to include. This year we actually had a couple of the individuals that attended donated some of that. We don't need to donate it, we need to actually pay for the, for example, the teepee that was there. He donated a big bulk of that. But, you know, if we want to attract him again, you know, we may need to pay for that service for him setting up. So we're just looking for some additional funding there. And I think that's it.
Any final comments for Joan?
Bring Dawn on, she's on point.
Thank you very much, Joan.
Okay, thank you.
Well, sorry.
I just have one question. We were talking about the sale from vehicles, and I think in total, there's a line here that says 412,000, but most of that was from the sale of 2 of the graders, and that was gonna go into where? General revenue, or it was gonna go into? Okay, so when I go through our policies, we have a capital replacement reserve policy number 1511. And capital means any engineered structure other than a road or a bridge. Other than a bridge. It includes building, machinery, equipment, or vehicle where the acquisition of the cost is more than $5,000. Capital replacement reserve should be established, and the sale of vehicles is supposed to go into that. So that's the policy.
Yeah, we're through the chair and Councillor Burrows. That's the way it's been budgeted, so we'll have to change it.
Any questions, comments? We run it on.
Yeah, any proceeds of the disposal of a capital item shall be credited to the capital replacement reserve.
Makes sense.
Right.
That was the new policy that was adopted at the last council meeting? Or
No, that's-
hasn't been adopted?
That's policy effective October 1st, 2002.
Okay, yep. I believe it's the same policy going forward.
So, I guess my question is, how come this wasn't done? Like, if you're prepping a budget, you should know where
I think what his comment is, if the policy says that's where the funds are supposed to be going, we have that 412 going to general revenue instead of into reserve.
So through the chair to council, if that's what the policy says, that's the way it should be set up. One of the things that we've done for the last 4 years is done nothing with reserves. So the recovery plan said you don't touch the reserves. So I think that's part of the equation that, because there's been sales from previous years that have not gone to reserves in the last 3 years. So that's the only reason I could think it would happen, is that we have not touched the reserves because the recovery plan said you were not supposed to do anything with the reserve balances.
So you're trying to use the funds to operate off of.
But having said that, credit's a little different than a debit, right? So if you're going, adding to the reserve, it would make sense to go to the reserve. It will decrease your surplus. So the end result will be you'll have a lower surplus to transfer to reserves. So council will have some flexibility in what they put into reserves. And right now, we've just been putting it into accumulated surplus as we get more funds. But most municipalities take those funds and assign them into reserves. But we're not in a position to know exactly what our reserve should be. So one of the things Mr. Frank and I have talked about is you need to have a reserve study. So you know what reserves you need, what level of reserves you should have. Because at this point in time, we have, what do we count, 22 reserves?
Yeah.
With various numbers in them. And to be honest with you, a lot of the numbers are from 8 years ago. And they're just sitting in a reserve, and I don't think anybody even knows what the money was there for. But yes, we will move that into reserves in the next tranche of the budget.
Yeah, and I think it just gives council a better picture because it gets dumped into the reserves and you know, you probably don't need a study to know that 18 million is not gonna cut it for reserves. Like, we know we need more is the point. That's all.
Well, to that point then, if the 300,000 on that budget line was supposed to go to reserves to pay back on the graders, do we want to take that 412 and put that 300 currently into the capital portion? So it's only going to pay to the overall budget.
Not quite following what you're saying.
Well, we have that line there for $300,000 for the lease of 2 graders currently, which through discussion should have been coded as $300,000 as a transfer to reserves for funding of the new graders that we're purchasing. If we're taking that 412 then currently, and that to the policy should be going into the reserves, we want to use that line for the 2 lease graders and put that back into the capital instead of moving that over to the reserve for this one. As I said, putting 3, if we're gonna put 412,000, do we wanna put 412 plus 300 into the equipment reserve?
So, if I could just jump in there, I think the sale is a completely different type of transaction than what was being contemplated with this 300K.
But what I'm saying, if you look at the budget for where the numbers are, that 412 is put into general revenue currently.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're taking that out of general revenue and that's going back into the equipment reserve also, and then we have 300,000 here for the line said lease of 2 graders, which should be going back into the reserve also. That's 712,000 going into the reserve and that'll leave our capital line about $712,000 shy. So I'm saying for what we put into that.
Well, the 300,000 though is a direct expense. It's an anticipated expense. Or are you talking about the 2023 300,000? You've got to be talking about.
We'll be 2020, of course. We'll have the sale of the 2 graders. We move that 412,000 out of general revenue and put that back in, as per policy, into the equipment reserve. And then we're gonna take this other 300,000, which I understand goes towards repayment of the equipment. But we're also using $412,000 towards repayment of the equipment, basically with the sale of the other 2.
As per policy.
As per policy, but what I'm saying is we want to move 412,000 plus 300,000 into that reserve, or do we want to use that line for the 300,000 and put that back into the general revenue to work on something else?
Well, I think you treat them independently. You follow policy and you put the 412 into reserve. And then the strategy was buy the grader, but treat it as a lease and annually put money into reserve.
No, I understand, but if you look at just how the budget was written though, we have that 412. It's not in the budget line right now to go that way. They'll have to make it go that way, but then that's gonna take another, just, $412,000 short off of our numbers that we have on the,
Andrew said that it would come out of the accumulated reserve, so it would just draw down that surplus.
It'll draw down the surplus.
Not reserve, but
But-
surplus.
The surplus are showing, we're looking at just another $2 million in the operating side, that's also gonna draw down some of that surplus we have there too. I'm just wondering if we add this 1.843, plus we take another 412, where we're at on the bottom line.
Your worship, if I may, at your next meeting or subsequent meeting, depending on, once we know all the corrections, we'll present you with those corrected ones. So the 412 has been noted, as well as the 300,000.
And it's just my concern is that if we're taking too much of the capital and putting, in towards reserves, and maybe with this other stuff we're adding, we're not gonna have what we're anticipating to run.
So-
We need to do some of the other stuff.
So technically, this is an operating revenue, your worship, so we're going to eliminate an operating revenue, put it into reserves, and it will lower our operating surplus by about $412,000, and that will leave us at about 1.5 million surplus for 2024. So we'll just eat up some of our surplus, but we're still putting that money away into reserves, so it's not like you're spending money, you're just putting it away into reserves.
It's just not gonna be like, we'll say per se, cash on hand that we're playing with is what I'm.
So it becomes an automated function by policy
Yeah.
to dump money into the capital equipment reserves, rather than at the end of the year, looking at what you have left over and saying, okay, we're gonna transfer this money to these reserves. So an automatic 412,000 will transfer into the equipment reserve through policy, and will be $412,000 shy at the end of the year in surplus with the amount we can transfer to reserves, correct? So it works out, it's just that one becomes automatic. I just think it's easier because if they put the policy there, the idea is to try and keep that reserve, that equipment reserve topped up, and if you get to the end of the year and don't do the transfers, like may have been happening.
Yeah, no, like, I just don't want to get us in a position where we're trying to operate, or we have stuff coming up and we're also running short. That's
Yep.
my concern. I guess, do we have Dawn ready to go? Good evening, Dawn, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, whenever you are ready and you want to run through your budget, let's have at her.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Sure can.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you, Your Worship and members of council. So you can see, I guess, on our priorities and initiatives, nothing wild and crazy, pretty much status quo for ag services, but we'll maintain our vegetation management program through the spraying and mowing. We're going to continue with our weed and pest inspection program using the Municipal Ag Mobile program. Our extension activities will continue. We're going to add, or proposing to add, an additional workshop for the green acreages program. So that's the program that we did this year based on acreages in the area and different initiatives that they can take on to maintain sustainability on their properties. Additionally, we will continue with our partnerships with the Yellowhead County West Central Forage Association and the Gateway Research Organization. We'll continue with monitoring pests such as mountain pine beetle and our wild boar trapping partnership with Alberta Pork as well as Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation. And we're still continuing to look at the eDNA monitoring. We haven't done that yet this year. We're still working on the process involved in that. So we need to continue with that. As well, now that we have more of a handle on our Agriculture Chronicles, we'll be doing promotion and distribution of that document. Maintaining our rental equipment as we have, hosting our Ag Services Appreciation Supper in March of 2024 in the Anselmo Hall. And at that time, we'll recognize our Ag Pioneers as well as our Rural Beautification Award winners. We'll continue with our VSI program at a 50% support for our eligible veterinary services or expenses. And lastly, continue with our pesticide container and used oil recycling program, as well as expanding on that program to include bale twine and grain bag recycling potentially as well. So, looking at the, sorry?
No, it's okay. John just sneezed.
Okay, well, bless you. Okay, so as far as the changes in the budget, we're looking at an overall decrease of 3.49%. And that is due to an inventory carryover for our chemicals, a decrease in the mountain pine beetle program due to fewer trees needing to be controlled. And we've seen that over the past years that we're getting less and less of a requirement there. We also have the Anselmo computer system for the bulk water, which was purchased in 2023, so we don't have to have that in the 2024 budget, as well as that amortization, which I'm not sure what that would be, an Andrew question there. So, and then also I should add based increases of horticultural services for the Addis group is another proposal that we're looking at. And based on council's decision last night regarding the air travel, I may need to add a little bit additional for the costs for that, but that will be something I can determine in the next day or so.
Any questions for Don? I guess for Andrew, the negative 30,000 for amortization, not budgeted, that's just a accounting line we're moving around.
Your worship, I would think that's a wrong description. Should not say that. It's from last year.
Okay.
But it's an increase in ASP conditional grant is the right explanation.
Okay. Anything else from council? No, I think that's all we got for you, Don.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Frank, I guess that's looks like we've gone through majority of the operating part there. Any other questions or comments to Mr. Frank? I guess we can probably wrap this up and have him bring it back to us on Monday with some more adjustments. Richard.
Mayor and Council, I have a bit of Parks and Rec.
Oh, Parks and Rec, sorry. It's,
Did you deal with some of that or not?
no, I think we.
Okay, there's not a lot here. It's a kind of a funny shared budget, so I can only speak to a portion of it as far as our Parks and Rec
I think that's the last one.
operator and his staff. Page 57.
It says 7072 Parks and Rec.
Page 57, you're right.
Yeah.
So a portion of this budget is Heather deals with some of the boards and some of the other stuff in this budget. So I'm just addressing the operations of the maintenance of the actual Parks and Rec sites. And as far as our initiatives and priorities, they're going to somewhat just maintain status quo. They'll continue to maintain the sites as in previous years, which I think they've done a great job. And then he is looking to upgrade some of his mowing equipment. One of them actually shows up on the capital budget there, one of the zero-turn mowers. It may not look really old to everybody, but those units are run like I would say 4 days out of 5 during the summer, they're run a lot, so they get a lot of hours on them, out mowing. They mow, and more mow. Okay, and then if we flip over the page to the next page, it just talks about a few of the changes here. So we talked earlier about Coal Mine Hill and trying to clean up some of the garbage. And this next line I can't speak too much about, but it's a new position. And then there's some grants and wages. Our family fun day, again, this is some of Heather's stuff. So almost all of this is tied to a new position, but if you negate that position, it appears that the budget's actually down. If you include that position, it does increase the budget. He did a fair bit of work this year, 2023, on some of the docks, putting in some of the screw piles and updating the docks that we have out there, so we don't need to do any of that, so we've decreased a little bit there. And the other kind of a pain in the butt for him is the stairs out at Hard Luck, so he will continue to, I think we're actually gonna have somebody coming in this year to change some of those stairs for us, where we're preparing the timbers right now, so that's one of the little more significant projects, but not giant. Other than that, it's pretty much the same.
Any questions on that, council? Nope, so we're good there. Any others there, Mr. Frank, that I'm missing?
Unless you want to go through ledge services and council is ledge services administration.
Does council want to save that for Monday or go through it now? No, we're getting in there a couple hours now. We already got a meeting booked for Monday. We'll hold those ones over for Monday. We still got the quick in-camera session you wanted to talk about, so.
And we can wait till Monday too for that if you want. It's, again, because it does tie with the.
With the ledge services.
Yeah,
Okay.
the min section.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. We can, I guess if council wants, then we can spend just about 2.5 hours. We can call it a night and come back on Monday, reconvene and carry on with what we got going on with some, I guess there'll be some updates and some more information coming also, so.
Same time Monday, right?
5:30, yeah, 6 o'clock is the meeting.
Any other, or last comments, anything from council before we?
I'd just like to thank Andrew and his team and Gord for preparing it. It's easy to follow and good presentations by staff. Thank you.
Well, I know you guys had a format we kind of took over and jumped around a whole bunch on, but thank you for working with us. I guess if that's what we're gonna do, we just motion to adjourn, I guess, tonight and come back, or we gotta just pause it?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Any council want to make a motion? Well, Councilor Prestige. Motion to adjourn at 8:20. Question, all in favor? Carried. We are adjourned. Thank you again, everybody.